Okay, guys, so we're going to take a look at now is some different ways to get to T Kimura. We're talking now about how to go from Kimura to the back. One of the main avenues to get to the back from Kimura is to get to T Kimura situations. However, to get to T Kimura, there were so many different ways to get there, I felt the need to break it apart into a couple different subcategories. So we're going to start things off from top position, and we're going to discuss several different ways that I could get to T Kimura, and eventually further on, we'll talk about what to do once we get there to actually secure the back. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to move into top position first, just going to open where my training partner is seated. Okay? When my training partner is seated in front of me, we have various forms of rolling Kimura that we usually look to employ. All right, basically looking to find ways to step inside my training partner's legs and then Kimura on either arm. Okay? Typically, when most people teach rolling Kimura actions, they do it on their training partner's rear posting arm. Okay? They either do so by grabbing their training partner's wrist ahead of time to go into those Kimura transitions, okay? Or getting the person to post on the floor and rolling into those transitions, okay? Now, that's not the only way to get to our T Kimura situations when my training partner's in a seated position. Another great way to do this is on my training partner's opposite arm. Most people don't think about this, okay? That arm is exposed and extended. Yes, I would say that in general it's usually the easiest Kimura, but often as we step in to try to go for that Kimura, my training partner will link into our leg and start thinking about going for single leg actions. Okay? Whenever my training partner does this, all I'm going to do is pull my training partner's elbow open and turn my body side on to go for my Kimura entry. From here, just like before, I roll right over my shoulder and we pull ourselves into T Kimura. Okay? To break things down further, we have T Kimura entries as we begin passing our training partner's guard from the knees. Okay, that's pretty much what we're going to see from standing. All right, in terms of T Kimura, my training partner scoots in. We'll get into a half guard situation. Okay, now my training partner has two arms that I could potentially Kimura. When he's flat on the mat, we'll focus on the top one. Okay, basically, anytime my training partner goes to reach and extend his arm for underhooks or post on me with his hand, we have opportunities to reach across and go for Kimura. Once I'm in said Kimura, if he's still controlling my leg, okay, all I look to do is, based on the mat, hop up and roll through. If he still had control over my leg, even when I rolled through, it's quite easy to just push and free my leg like so. Okay? There's some really cool creative entries that you can get to that particular Kimura. One of my favorites is to get into a situation where I grab my training partner's wrist, I thread underneath, and I get a 2-on-1. As my training partner goes to retract, I link through, and I go into my Kimura transition like so. That's one of my favorite ways to get there. Okay? Now, we have our training partner's bottom side arm. How does this come into play? Well, if my training partner is underhooking me with the top side arm, and I felt as though it's difficult to get to Kimura here, another place I can reach for it is over my training partner. Okay? So I just go over my training partner's head and shoulders, I grab the wrist, I penetrate an arm through. Very important, I get past my training partner's head here. If I'm reaching with my training partner's head inside, it's hard to get to that T Kimura situation. So I go head over head, I reach, and I roll through. Okay? Of course, if we're moving down the line and we ever get to a side control situation, and my training partner's turned, okay? When we enter into our Kimuras here, it's a very easy thing to get behind your training partner for T Kimura. I basically just step behind my training partner's head, okay? And I'd be in T Kimura situations quite easily, okay? Now that we've gone through most of the transitions on top, okay, you can see there's a multitude of ways for us to get to that T Kimura situation. Furthermore, we'll start to figure out how to get from the actual T Kimura to the back, okay, but the entries become important. I know that I'm not reteaching everything in this DVD, but it starts to become relevant as to the actual pathways and entries to get to the back from the Kimura. So now we're going to discuss how to get into some T Kimura situations from the bottom position. Okay, so again, we're moving from the system of the Kimura to the back. We're not quite there, but getting to T Kimura gets you damn close. Okay, so we're in bottom situation. It's a little simpler than top. There's not quite as many options, but still quite a few. All right, the two main actions that are going to get me to T Kimura are both reversals. One is going to be various forms of sumigashi, okay, with using my feet. And the other is going to be taking my training partner's hand and putting it behind his back. let's discuss taking a hand and putting it behind the back. Even in a situation where I got mounted by my opponent, if I'm able to move my training partner's hand behind his back, he will likely, unless he wants his arm broken, roll through and expose his back to Tikimura. Okay? So, that just goes to say right there, pretty much any situation you get in where you can put your opponent's hand behind his back can open up the doorway to get to Tikimura, or obviously submitting your opponent with Kimura. So let's say I'm in side control. I get a hand behind the back. Very easy transition to back exposure. Okay, if I'm in half guard, same thing. Hand behind the back. And now I obviously have a choice. I don't have to go into the back. I'm going to release my legs to go into the back, or I could follow to break the arm with Kimura. But again, it's all about Kikimura. I just let him go. And once again, I move to my Tikimura situations. So that's how we get to Tikimura, through the idea of taking an arm and putting it behind the back. Okay? Now, assuming I cannot put my training partner's hand behind his back. Okay? So my training partner is in situations where the arm is very tight. Okay? In these situations, okay, what I look to do is elevate my training partner with my feet. Okay? Typically, first, even without putting a butterfly hook in, it's possible for me to shovel my hips underneath my training partner, pull, and point my toes. All right? And in this instance, I can throw my training partner through and get to Tikimura. Even better than that would be getting a butterfly hook inside. So now I have a lifting action, so I'll just rotate so you guys can see. My toes coming inside the knee, shoveling my hips underneath, lifting towards my head, and elevating over. Okay? For those of you that struggle with this, a big part of this is lifting and elevating your training partner towards you. Okay? If you leave yourself extended and try to pull from here, it's not going to work. Hands come to my chest and towards my head. My knees come to my chest and towards my head. Finally, I drop a foot on the ground and I lift with the foot. And I get behind my training partner. Okay? Now, that's just standard Sumigaeshi with putting my foot on the inside there, using my feet as elevators. Okay? We can also use variations of Yoko Sumigaeshi to get there. Okay? We discussed this earlier in the DVD, that anytime I get into situations where I have Kimura, like so, perhaps I enter to the Kimura from the back, all right? Perhaps I had Kimura and decided instead of lifting to elevate, I sat up, all right? We're in a Yoko Sumigaeshi situation where two knees point out to the side. All right, here, instead of just lifting my training partner straight over his shoulder, he's going to go a little bit in an arc. I'm going to pull with my foot and then extend my training partner over the top. And from here, we land in Tikimura. Do that one more time. Pull and arc. Everything's about bringing him in, then extending him over. Notice a common thread here with these elevations is that there's two distinct periods. A period where we coiled and a period where we extend. If you start in extension, it's very hard to lift people. Now we're going to take a look at some transitions to Tikimura, also probably crucifix from the turtle position, and we'll talk about how we can use those to start exposing the back. And my training partner goes into the turtle position. Okay? All right, so when I get into the turtle position and I have opportunities to go for various forms of Kimura on my training partner, all right, as well as crucifix, it's definitely a good time to start trying to expose the back. Of course, we can just start going to seatbelt transitions, all right, but Kimura is also available, okay? When we do the crucifix transitions, basically what I'm looking to do is to get my heel inside my training partner's forearm. You can do this from a seatbelt, where you're gift wrapping into a Kimura, or you can do this from a Kimura separated, all right, where my training partner's head is not involved. Either one is acceptable. Now, when I try to initially get the crucifix, okay, it is possible to just snake my leg through, all right, and then from this position, turn, and I'm already in a crucifix. Okay? Okay, this is your basic crucifix entry. Would basically be a situation where I either have that seatbelt or far Kimura, I slide my knee underneath, I fish my leg in, and we're already locked up. Okay? And in these situations, we have two options. We can fall backwards, or we can roll forwards. Okay, sometimes what will happen is as you're trying to fall backwards, you feel like they've got a decent base and they're preventing this. No problem. I'll take one hand off of the Kimura to get a single arm Kimura, and we'll roll our way through into crucifix. Sometimes they won't allow you to lace your legs in for the crucifix early on. Okay, in which case I'm going to take my knee. I'm going to try to wedge it behind my training partner's elbow. Okay, it's kind of the first step. If I don't get the knee wedged behind the elbow, the crucifix is very difficult. It's almost impossible. So what I need to do is open up that elbow a little bit and slide my knee inside. Now, even if the arm is tight, okay, all I need is a heel in front of the forearm. Let's look at this again. Heel in front of the forearm, okay? Not toes. If I go toes in front of the forearm, it's often the case that even if I pull back, I lose my training partner's arm. Stay tight, okay? No, with your arms. Go back. All right. This is often the case that as I try to put my toes inside, and as I fall back, the toes just come off. My training partner keeps his hand tight to his chest. All right. With the heel inside, even as my training partner tries to keep his hands tight to his chest, I'm almost always able to extend out and then place my training partner in this position. Okay? This is also true of rolling forwards. Okay? I have said Kimura. I'll just take it off and turn it to a one-on-one Kimura. Okay? From here, I push off the ground, roll my training partner through like so. Okay? And once again, we find ourselves in these crucifix situations. Okay? Now, we discussed before, basically how we're going to look to expose our training partners back in these crucifix situations. For the most part, all I'm really looking to do is come into cross faces, bar the arm, get my training partner up, start placing hooks in. When we do, notice we have a trapped arm. All right, so we're able to go into rear naked strangles or back triangles. Back up to the knees. Okay. So, there's one other transition here. My training partner goes to grab a single leg. We discussed this before. As my training partner's in single leg, okay, I can get a hold of my training partner for Kimura. I can slide to bottom position. Good, come back up. Or another real possibility is to step this leg up and lift my training partner into those T Kimura situations. Okay, so we've taken a look at many different situations where we can end up in T Kimura. And you may be asking yourself, well, okay, Gary, I can get to T Kimura, I can get to crucifix, and we kind of showed how we're going to take the back from there, but how are we going to go from the actual T Kimura to the back other than the crucifix transition? Okay, now the first most obvious one, when I get in this situation, is as my training partner turns into me. We discussed already that we have an ability to attack my training partner with Juji Gatame. Later on, we'll talk about how we can go into back triangles. Okay. The third option offensively we have from this T Kimura situation is to drop down to my opponent's hip and place a hook in. Okay. Whenever I place this hook in, I begin pulling my training partner towards the opposite side. Okay. As I pull my training partner towards the opposite side to take the back, okay, if I do not reset and get a seatbelt grip, I allow my training partner to fall to the opposite side and start escaping. Okay? So it's very important that when I get into this T Kimura situation and he turns towards me, that once I capture my opponent's hip, I pull my opponent back. Okay? And as I pull my opponent back, I switch to a seatbelt situation. Okay? Then I place my top hook in. Okay? So we'll do this one more time. I got that hook in. Okay? And I started to pull my training partner onto me. Okay? As this happens, it's very important that I get back to a seatbelt. Okay? However it is that I do. Now, if I want to play around with one hook in, that's fine, but it's very easy to score that top hook. Alright? Just by coming over my training partner's hip. Now, the one other way that we can look to expose our training partner's back, sometimes what people will do in this situation is just stay flat. They don't want to move, okay? So one other way that we can look to expose the back is to put my head down towards the floor and begin to get up myself so I can pull my training partner onto me. So I put my head down to the mat, okay? And you're going to see me take my right knee and slide it behind my opponent. As I slide my right knee behind my opponent, I can just sit like so. And then we'll have opportunities later on to talk about back triangles as well as just pulling my training partner right to the back again. Once again, we really don't like hanging on to just the Kimura on the back. All right? We always want to be ready to go somewhere from here or to transition. Okay? Otherwise, my training partner will fall off. So as soon as we make this transition, let's do it one last time, where I put my head down towards the floor, my knee slides in, and I sit. As soon as I go to collect the back, I look to capture my training partner's head to make sure I have full control. From here, of course, we go right into our back system. We have various rear naked strangles, back triangles, all different kinds of things that we can go through. Okay, so another great way we can go from Kimura to the back system and chain the system again is to go into cross-body ride transitions. Cross-body ride transitions you're going to see as a main method and pathway to the back from a couple of other systems as well, but from Kimura it's definitely very prevalent. Basically, anytime we get into dorsal situations or situations where we're in T-Kimura, we'll have options for cross-body ride. So my training partner will get in one of these dorsal situations. So like I've mentioned before, in the dorsal situations I'm referring to, it could be from half guard, side control, even with the leg stepped over the head. But the idea is that my training partner's two knees start to face me. Okay? So no matter where I am, whether I was in this situation, side control, even with one of my legs trapped by my training partner in a half guard, okay, I have opportunities for cross-body ride, mainly because the two knees are facing me, and I can start to get control over my training partner's top leg. Now remember, when we did the leg entries, okay, we were able to grab our training partner's top leg, pull it towards us, and we could start entering the legs. This is very similar. The difference is that instead of elevating the knee, we press the leg down. As we press the leg down, my foot comes behind my training partner's Achilles tendon, and my bottom leg links in. It's not absolutely necessary that you get figure fours in order to go to cross-body ride, but I do think it helps quite a bit. Okay? So we're stomping on the lower leg, we create a hook, and we figure a four. The bare minimum you need, okay, if you weren't going to figure four, for some reason that's difficult for you, the bare minimum you need is both ankles above your training partner's ankle. I don't want to just have one above my training partner's ankle. I put two, okay? If it's hard to scorpion the leg and actually get to this position, no problem. All right, I just want both my legs on top. Now I'm going to start letting go of the arm. I have to let go of the arm because if I don't, it really messes up the transition to cross-body ride, and I'll kind of fall flat on my face. So I move from the Kimura to a situation where I lean across my training partner's hips. The farther away from my training partner I try to roll, the more difficult the cross-body ride entry becomes. As I try to roll, my training partner can extend back and actually re-expose my back. Definitely something I'm not interested in. So what I want to do is as I come on top of my training partner, I want to look to take my shoulder and match it to my training partner's tailbone. I often will also grab my training partner's opposite leg to make sure that my training partner has a difficult time reversing the action. I can even go so far as to scoop into my training partner's leg. Now, I stay nice and close to my training partner so that as I turn to my shoulders, I'm well at an angle underneath my training partner, instead of being out here where my training partner can reverse the action. Okay? Once we're in these cross-body ride transitions, all right, we're well within our back system again to either attack our training partner's legs, arms, neck, etc. that we had gone over in the previous situations in the DVD. Okay? One last time. I'm in the dorsal situation. Okay, and I notice my training partner's knees are starting to face me. I grab my training partner's leg. I pass the Achilles tendon. I lace my legs in. I release the Kimura, and I start tucking my shoulder in towards my training partner's tailbone, and I roll towards the legs, getting into these cross-body ride transitions. Okay? From here, like I said, we have our different submission series available. from the back system. Now, the last way is much simpler. Okay? Training partner faces that direction. Sit on your butt. Okay? And as I move in from T Kimura, okay, just like we did in the previous section, as our training partner starts to turn, and I start to capture my training partner's hip, instead of fully pulling my training partner and taking the back, what we do is pull my training partner to the side, use a knee in his butt, and go right into our cross body ride. Now from here we have actions on our training partner's legs, arms, neck, etc., just like we did previously. Okay, so again, that transition is quite easy. Anytime I'm in T Kimura and my training partner goes to turn away, okay, I can get one hook in on my training partner. Okay, as I get that hook in, I start pulling my training partner to the side. Okay, and I use my knee to elevate and lock in. This is the one exception to the rule where I can keep this Kimura as I go to take the back. If I just put a regular hook in, it opens up escapes in this direction. Okay? But when I go to cross body ride, it's perfectly reasonable to continue to hold on to this Kimura grip. Okay? Eventually I'm going to transition to other submissions. Alright, but this is a good way to make sure my training partner's back is secure. Okay? Alright, now another really easy opportunity for Kimura to the back transition is just when my training partner is in dorsal situations. Now this is excluding situations where I'm trying to go to T Kimura, etc. This is just basically my training partner's propped up and I'm looking for very simple solutions to get to my training partner's back. I have one very simple solution and one a little bit more complex, something that I've been working on for a little bit of time. So I think you'll like both of them. The simple solution is as follows. Basically, anytime I get into a Kimura situation and I want to expose the back, it's usually a pretty simple thing. Okay? Basically, I start circling around my training partner and I put a hand in underneath my training partner's head. Now, if you can't see that, let's rotate a little bit. Okay? My hand comes underneath my training partner's head, and I continue to rotate my training partner forward, prop him up, and I get my seatbelt position. As I get the seatbelt position, it's really easy to just pull my training partner up into my hips. I'd imagine that you guys have probably seen this a million times before, but it's worth noting as we categorize ways of going from Kimura to someone's back. So whether I had the Kimura on this side or the opposing side, I just look to prop my training partner up and reach underneath the head. As I do so, typically I walk my training partner forward a little bit with this hand just to get him turned. And we lock our hands up like so in a gift wrap situation. Now I'm just going to sit onto my butt and pull my training partner into me. What we don't like to do in these situations, a common mistake, is to fall to a hip. It's hard to get your training partner's back from here. Instead, we slide our training partner's head directly underneath our knee, and we take a seat like so. As he tries to push, pull, whatever he wants to do, he just falls right into my lap with a back kick. Now, an alternative way to do this, when my training partner does a little bit of a better job keeping himself flat to the floor, okay, is as follows. My training partner's kind of in a flattened out position, so he's really no longer dorsal. All right, I kind of have my Kimura in place. I can't wedge it out to try to finish, which is what we'd normally try to do in this situation. Okay, it's still stuck to my training partner's chest. So here's what I'm going to do. I'll get a one-on-one situation with my training partner in Kimura. I'll post on the mat on the opposite side, and I'm going to start moving into a north-south situation. Now, there's a couple different ways of which to do this that I'll discuss with you. I'm going to take my hand, and I'm going to grab my training partner by the shoulder. Okay? The grip that I'm making really only has to grab my training partner by like the tricep, right, or the lat muscle, but both of those are acceptable, or I can try to take my middle finger and go through my training partner's armpit. Now, with these two grips, I look to take my knee and prop it in behind my training partner's head. From here, as my training partner tries to resist, I just pull. Go ahead and try and resist. And then pull my training partner straight up and take the back. I encourage you to try this for yourselves. It looks a little far-fetched. I have a lot of success with this in the training room. Okay? I get into a Kimura situation. If I'm on the opposite side, I circle to the same side as the Kimura. Okay? Now, I will often prop my training partner up slightly. This time, I don't get him completely turned onto his side. It just props up slightly. And I get a knee underneath his head. If you do not get this knee under the head, it makes this move incredibly difficult. I can't realistically expect to drag his dead body across the floor without wedging myself underneath him at least some degree. So I lift him slightly, and I wedge this knee underneath. You need to see that from a different angle. Let's rotate. From here, I lean across my training partner. Knee comes in, and I grab his armpit. Now when I go to the seated position, he tries to pull away from me. I got him. I step this leg up and just drag my training partner up on top of me so that I can get to the back. This is also possible if you fully scoop your training partner's arm. That's the minimum that you need. If you'd like, you can dive deeper, right, and get a better grip on your training partner. The downside to this is that I have to do a good job of opening up so that my training partner's head can pass through. When you just grab like so, it's natural. Here is a better bite, okay? But if you just try to fall back, you're going to crush your training partner's face and you can't get to the back. So as you fall back, you have to open up and allow the head to pass through. Now from here, I drag my training partner up like so, okay? Truth is, this move doesn't just have to be done off of like Kimura. I can just do this from over-under, essentially. Okay, have one over, one under on either side. Okay? Two underneath isn't as effective. I really like this one over, one under strategy, and it's quite an effective way to start turning my training partner, wedging in underneath, and pulling my training partner up like so. All right, and again, once I get to this position where he's in my lap, try to pull, move away from me. It's hard. It's pretty easy for me to just bring my knees to my chest and immediately start going after submissions while I'm on my training partner's back, like so. Now we're going to take a look at the transition between Kimura to triangles. This is something that I want you to pay special attention to in the DVD. It's one of those relationships that goes back and forth, similar to the Kimura and the guillotine, where one's present, the other is almost always present, and you can switch back and forth between the two. Especially important if the triangle or the Kimura happens to be one of your favorite submissions, because you'll be able to transition from one to the next pretty much anytime you're in either situation. So we're going to start things off by being in dorsal situations like we discussed before. So my training partner will be turned side on, okay? Whenever I have a Kimura turned side on, it's likely that my training partner has his hands locked, okay? And this makes things difficult for a few different reasons, okay? Yeah, it's difficult to separate my hands and put my training partner's arm behind his back. If I look to transition into Jujigatame later, it still makes things difficult because the hands are still well connected. So if I'm really struggling with disconnecting hands, triangles are always a great option, okay? So I have this Kimura in place. Probably the first and most obvious option is to thread my leg through my training partner's arms, similar to if I was setting up Jujigatame. So instead of stepping around my training partner and to the inside of his elbow, I'll rotate so you guys can see. What I will attempt to do is open up my training partner's arms, not to separate, but just to open and create some distance, okay? And put my leg through and inside my training partner's neck like so. As I've done this, I backstep my training partner's head, and I have two choices here that are very good. The first is to pull myself into a Mote Senkaku, all right? The front triangle as my training partner comes up to his knees. We go to a score inside my training partner's knee, and we strangle, okay? So once again, I've landed from this Kimura with my training partner's locked hands, and I've scored this position, which I normally would have made as Jujigatame, but I transferred into a Mote Senkaku. I did this, go back, by taking my top side leg off and placing it underneath my training partner's head, like so, okay? If that wasn't enough, one thing you can do is sit up and slide your knee underneath your training partner's head to make it a little bit easier for you. Okay, I'm back. Another good transition that we can go for from here is ankle Senkaku. This is when my ankle stays across my training partner's neck like so, instead of going deep to inside knee against my training partner's neck. So let's take a look at the relationship between a Mote Senkaku, okay, which is this position, okay, and ankle senkaku, which is essentially this position. Okay, comes up to his knees. Okay, I change angles and lock like so. Let's rotate. The leg formation, my knee goes 90 degrees with the ground, and my legs are locked like so, as opposed to this. Go back down. Okay, I start from Kimura, my ankle's in. Basically, to make sure that I don't have my training partner go all the way to my knee, I put my knee on the floor and I drop to a hip. My knee goes behind my training partner's head and I lock up. As he comes up to his knees, I now can grab my training partner's far elbow and drive in for the finish. Okay? Changes the dynamic a little bit. Again, this DVD is not so much about mechanics, but it's important to know how to finish the submission. I grab my training partner's far elbow and rotate my shin in like so for the finish. Now, those are our two front triangles, okay, front-facing triangles, I should say. The ankle senkaku is different, that we have from dorsal situations. Another great transition to triangles that we have from dorsal situations is Yoko senkaku. Okay, I'll turn this way so they can see the transition on the arm. Okay, once again, my training partner's hands are locked up tight. I'm having a tough time, fishing arms out for Kimura, etc. One of the things I like to do is, again, pull the arms open, and I'm going to score my right leg inside the elbow this time. So my right leg swings out and chops right inside the armpit like so. From here, it typically is hard for my training partner to maintain the lock of his hands. He can try, okay? But basically, as I lock up like so and pull the headlock hand and pull the Kimura apart, it's likely that I get into side triangle situations. From the side triangle, I can grab my training partner's elbow like so, turn myself down, okay, and I can look to lock up and drive my hip into my training partner's neck, okay. Once again, leg shoots through nice and deep, lock up, and my hip drives into my training partner's neck, okay. One more time on that transition. It's a big step around and an opening of my training partner's arm so that there's space to come behind the elbow. From here, I fall to my side, and I look to pull my training partner's arm through, typically at the elbow. I get in nice and deep. I lock up top to bottom. And my hip presses into my training partner for the finish. Another great way to work is to do the same transition, but this time with the intentions of getting to the back triangle. Okay? As I step in to my training partner's armpit, I fall over my training partner's head. Okay? As I fall over my training partner's head, I can then pull my training partner's arm up and over his head. I'm right into the back triangle. Okay? Let's look at this again. I'm in dorsal Kimura sorts of situations. And I either come in front of the elbow, or for this back triangle sequence, technically, lock up nice and tight, I can slide in front of the bicep. Both work quite well. I sink down, I pull his arms up over his head, and I look to lock up my back triangle. Once again, for the finish here, just suck my knees back, all right, as I clank that neck nice and tight between the knee. Okay? I'll show both of those transitions one more time. Okay? I can either step through and fall back, separating hands, or if I feel a little bit more comfortable, so that I don't have to worry about the hand separation, I get my foot inside the bicep. I fall back, and I lock up like so for the back triangle or Shiro Senkaku. So we went back to try to add one more technique to dorsal Kimura, okay, to triangle. The reason I left it out is because it's not actually a triangle at all, but it is using the legs to strangle your training partner. So we'll take a look at it. I think it's a very important transition to bring up. It's a unique submission that you don't really get from any other place, but it's very useful out of Kimura. I've scored this in competition before. I've had teammates score this in competition before. It is rare, but effective. I get into Kimura situations, and my training partner does a good job locking hands here. Okay? Now, to make sure my training partner isn't going to stop me from doing what I'm about to do, I'm going to take my left hand and I'm going to cover my training partner's hand. So you see how he's locking up hands like so? Let's say he went palm to palm, for example. Okay? I'm just going to look to try my best to cover my training partner's hand with my hands. All right? Another way that I can do this is to take my Kimura out and just grab my training partner's bottom side wrist. Okay? So I can either keep Kimura if he has his hands laced the way that he did previously. I can kind of just cover my hand over his hand just to make sure that that's locked in place. Or I can grab like so, where I almost have like a key lock sort of situation right over my training partner's far wrist, and I just keep everything tight to his chest. Okay. The reason for this is if when I step over my training partner's head for this move, he's able to block me at all with his hands or elbows, it's really going to disrupt the move. So I keep everything locked in. I step over as if I'm going to go for dorsal Kimura, and I just hook my knee directly underneath my training partner's jaw. As I do this, I fall off the side of my training partner, and I have my legs scissored in like so. Okay? Now, when I go to finish this strangle, it's a little tricky. The key to making this work, in my opinion, is to get the bone on the inside part of your knee to match up about center line with your training partner's throat. If you go too deep and you end up trying to strangle your training partner with your thighs, it's often the case your training partner can kind of turn his jaw, get his head in there, and you don't really get a proper strangle. Same thing goes if I go too shallow and it just ends up matching up to my training partner's neck with my shins, I also won't get a very good tight strangle. There's something about the bones inside my knee that when matched up in the front and matched up from underneath, even when my training partner tries to turn his neck, he does a great job of pinching in and finishing the strangle. All right? So I start things off when I fall with kind of using the pocket of my knee to pull his chin open to expose the neck. So as I step over and control my training partner's wrist, I open up my training partner's neck, I fall off to the side, and my bottom knee matches up right underneath my training partner's neck. So I have two knees pinching together around my training partner's neck like so. From this position, I'm going to extend my legs and pinch my two knees together. The strangle comes on quite quickly. I think one of my teammates actually put somebody out with it before. All right, so this is a very effective strangle. The scissor choke. Now we're going to take a little bit of a look at Kimura out of Kimura to triangle transitions from T Kimura and crucifix. Okay, we'll start from T Kimura because most of these triangle transitions are going to require us to get to crucifix. Okay, so we'll start things off in T Kimura. Okay, and then what will often happen that will get us into crucifix situations is my training partner will turn towards us, and we had mentioned the other transitions where we could go into Juji Gatame by crossing my training partner's head, or going to the back by trapping my training partner's hip. All right, but there is a third option. We discussed it a little bit when going for arm bars, which is to cover my training partner's shoulder. So when he goes to turn on top of us, we press into our training partner, we cover the shoulder, okay, and then we kind of have two options here. I can start sitting my training partner down, or I can follow him a little bit, but either way, I get my knee up behind my opponent so that I can put him into back triangle situations. All right, now, let's change angles so we can see a little bit. You're going to point your feet out towards that wall. Okay? So once again, in T Kimura, he starts turning up towards the camera, and I cover my training partner's shoulder like so. Okay? Now, this is kind of what I wanted to see. Move a little bit. Good. Okay, keep turning towards me. The other way. This way. Like turn. Nope, not walking, just turning. Like you're going to try to get up. Exactly. All right? Now, what I'm going to look to do, it's hard to see, but I'm going to do my best for you, is to prop my knee up. So my head touches the floor for balance, and to take weight off my bottom leg. My knee props up so that I can then sit down. From here, I open my training partner up, and we go right into the back triangle. Another situation that we can find ourselves in, if we get to cover the shoulder as he turns, we cover our training partner's shoulder. Another thing that we can find ourselves in is a side triangle. But before we can do that, I got to cover his head. So we're going to sit our training partner down at the shoulder, moving into crucifix. Then I go into a one-on-one Kimura, push my training partner's head down, cover my training partner's head like so with my leg. Now we're in the side triangle situation again. I grab my training partner's elbow, go hip to neck by straightening out my legs, and I lock top to bottom, finishing the strangle by pulling myself in. Like so. Okay? One last time. My training partner starts turning, all right, and he exposes his shoulder. Okay, like so. All right? As my training partner exposes his shoulder, I sit him down. So we have that crucifix transition. I go one-on-one, and I post on my training partner's head. Okay? Another way you can do this to make it a little bit safer, the transition, because you see when my leg floats, the arm could come out. Another way we can do this is we can switch legs. So I can force my training partner's arm to be controlled with my left leg. Now, as I push the head down, the arm remains trapped, and it's a very easy transition to that Yoko Senkaku. Now I reach for my training partner's elbow, my hips drive down, we lock up, and we strangle. All right, now we're going to take a look at some transitions to the triangle from bottom position. Okay, most of them are pretty similar. So basically, my training partner is going to be onto his knees. All right, I'm going to be in bottom position. Maybe I get a hold of my training partner with a Kimura from this position. Maybe it even started on top, but I'd fall into bottom position. And what this is going to look like is, once again, I start positioning, pushing off my training partner. All right, and a lot of times what we do is kind of bring this secondary leg out to try to force this Kimura out. Or we start going into these power Kimura and Senkaku Kimura transitions, where when I'm here, my training partner, instead of rolling forward and trying to evade my submissions this way, my training partner starts kind of going into posturing actions. And as my training partner goes into posturing actions, one quick thing we can always do is just wrap our leg around our training partner's neck like so. And now from here, we're already in triangle situations. All right, from here, all right, my training partner, I could finish him with the Kimura, technically. We'll talk about that a little bit when we get to triangle situations and we go to different submissions. All right, or I could just let go, get my trap triangle going, and go right into my triangle like so. So once again, my training partner's hunkered down in any particular bottom position, right? Or maybe I went to top position, okay, and I fell off of my training partner, maybe going for this power Kimura, whatever the case may be. My training partner starts to pop up, and I see that head raise. We just rotate our head around the corner, our leg around the corner, and we're in a trap triangle. From here, we scoop into the legs, and we go into our finish. Other transitions that we could consider would involve me moving around my training partner. So, again, in these half guard sorts of situations, I take my leg out and I thread my leg through my training partner's arm while he's attempting to hide it. Okay? As my training partner goes to do this, what I begin to do is take my bottom leg out and post on the floor. As I take my bottom leg out and post on the floor, I then tuck myself underneath my training partner, like so. From here, my knee comes behind my training partner's head, and I'm able to lock into an ankle Senkaku, like so. And so this transition again from a different angle. So I'm in a half guard bottom position, all right, and I'm able to shirk my hips out, throw my leg through my training partner's arm, and thread it through like so. From here, I take my bottom leg out and I start posting on the floor. Okay, I'm going to begin inverting underneath my training partner and placing my knee behind my training partner's head so that I can lock up for an ankle Senkaku. From here, I switch off to my training partner's forearm and we get the finish. I'll go over this one more time just because it's a little bit of a difficult transition. It's easiest to see when we do it on this side. I lock up on my training partner and I start pushing him away. I flick my leg through my training partner's arm as he's hiding. Okay? As I start pushing off the mat, I look to come onto my shoulders and get my knee behind my training partner's head. From this position, I grab my stay up. I grab my own shin, I lock up, and I look to finish. If for some reason this slides all the way through, of course we just have our regular Omote Senkaku. Now we're going to take a look at the omoplata. And while we're in the Kimura subsection, omoplata functions effectively very similarly to Kimura, right, in the sense that the arm's getting brought behind the back. So a lot of the reactions are very similar. I figured it fits in quite nicely with the Kimura system. Could have stuck it with arm locks, but it doesn't really make too much of a difference. And we'll just see how we can transition to some of the other subsystems off of omoplata. I think omoplata without the gi tends to be a little bit of a weak move. Okay, it's kind of hard to actually finish as a submission hold without the gi. In the gi, I can see some strength to it because you have lapels to hold on to across your training partner's back, etc. Omoplata often results in people rolling out and your training partner's posturing out pretty quickly and all these different things that tend to happen. All right, and we rarely end up actually finishing that submission without the gi. So the transitions from there become very important because you may find yourself in omoplata off of all different kinds of submission holds, right? Namely triangles or arm locks or even Kimura, for example. I might be trying to finish somebody with Kimura, and as they're rolling out, I might put them in omoplata, which we'll see in the next section. But you'll find yourself there, and you want to be able to be productive while you're there. You want to be able to have some sort of submission threat. So I'll get into a basic omoplata. I have his head pointing out this way so we can kind of see what's going on. And we'll talk about how we can transition into some of the subsystems. All right. The first thing that comes to mind when I get into this omoplata position is my training partner being very likely to raise his head off of the ground. Okay. As my training partner raises his head off of the ground, I can quite easily flick my leg no longer in front of his face, but over his shoulders, and my other leg can swing around the corner. Now, one thing we want to think about here when we're making this transition is I don't want to make a big swinging motion, okay? It makes it very easy for my training partner to intercept my leg, okay? So when we decide we're going to switch to triangle, I put my leg across my training partner's shoulder, and basically all I'm going to do is pommel my shin around my training partner's neck. And as my training partner pops up, my leg locks around quite easily, okay? If your training partner really forces it, you'll go right into the triangle no matter what, okay? But sometimes you only really get a light posturing reaction, in which case I cover the shoulder, and then I look to pommel that shin right across, okay? If we do get involved in a situation where my training partner catches my leg for whatever reason, okay, what we'll try to do, to the best of our ability, is pommel our leg to the inside of our training partner's biceps so that we can still shoot our way through. Another potential option, if, say, for example, my training partner grabbed my lower leg, okay, as I can grab my training partner's wrist and go in like so. Okay, should have said upper leg. Usually a little bit easier to grab a hold of the wrist here. All right, even if my training partner managed, when I was in a transition like this, to clamp down on my thigh with his other hand, okay, I can take the hand, remove, and move into triangle transitions. Okay, for the most part, what we're going to see from here is a mote senkaku with a front triangle. Okay, that's the first transition that I see is highly likely. Another transition that I see as likely is as I'm getting into transitions like this, before I can even react to move to another submission hold, my training partner is going to go into a defensive role. Okay, why? Because he often knows that he's going to be threatened as I try to sit up from situations like this. Okay, so as soon as he gets put into that omoplata, he starts going into his defensive role. Now, if I stay loose and I don't control my training partner's arm, it's highly likely he manages to pull his arm out in this instance. So one of the things I want to do is to cut my training partner at the elbow and hold on to my training partner at the wrist while I force my knees down towards the floor. As my training partner goes into his defensive role, I put my knee in front of my training partner's shoulder, okay, and I immediately begin breaking my training partner's arm with the shoulder senkaku, like so. Okay, go back. It is possible, as my training partner rolls, for me to get to regular juji gatame situations, but what you'll notice is I leave a ton of gap for this elbow to pull through and in between my legs. So what I'd like to do is keep that triangle locked and get into a tight situation where I can break the arm like so. Right? This way there's no separation. So my training partner goes into his defensive role. I hold on tight to the arm, really making sure that this elbow doesn't slip out. Okay, holding on nice and tight. I lock up my figure of four, and I break around the outside of the hip. Okay? So we have the triangle situation. We have a defensive roll into juji gatame. Okay? Now, I have an attack on my training partner's legs. Okay? As I get into this situation, and I notice that my training partner's legs are close by. Okay, I'm going to rotate side arm. Okay, So I get to the omoplata. I know I'm probably not going to finish it as a submission, so I proactively dip my leg inside my training partner's hip line like so. Okay? And I capture my training partner's leg either with a 2-on-1 or, of course, with our scoop grip with locked hands. Either way works just fine. Now from here I begin climbing to my training partner's leg. We have a ton of different transitions as usual. We can attack from the outside, right, with toe holds and heel hooks. Or I can push off of my training partner and lock senkakus. Okay? Either inside the legs or outside the legs. And begin our assault on our training partner's legs like so. Basically, again, realizing that if I can enter my training partner's legs from this position, any number of submissions would be available to me. All right, last movements here involve me sitting up on my training partner. Let's say I somehow manage during the process of this omoplata to actually reach the seated position. Okay? Now, rather than the attempt to finish the break in the omoplata, which I know is going to be a tough transition, I'd rather get to a better position or submission situation. So what I'm going to look to do is I'm going to look to splay my legs in that hurdler stretch situation, similar to the way that we did when we were in a calf slicer on our training partner's legs to take the back. This time, I split my legs to free myself from the omoplata, and I look to join my hands around my training partner so that I can begin to take the back. Once again, I've managed to sit up and pendulum my legs up. I'm noticing the submission is going to be relatively difficult to finish. I split my legs like so. Okay? And I capture a seatbelt grip. From here, I switch my legs a second time and look to take my training partner's back. Finally, another way I can look to transition as I begin to sit up is I can shoot my hands through my training partner's shoulder and over my training partner's neck. Okay, now I can't really finish the Darce Strangle or the omoplata from here. Neither would be possible to finish. So I have to release the arm. Okay, I open the legs. As I release the arm, I move right into our front headlocking system, where I can dip my training partner down, finishing the inverted katagatame like so. Or if I so desired, come up. Or if I so desired, for whatever reason, I can switch off into any other front headlocking submission. All right, and that settles that for the omoplata. So now we're going to take a look at how rotation applies when we're starting to do some of these upper body submissions like Kimura. We went over this quite a bit when it comes to leg locking because a lot of our most effective leg locking submissions are rotational. So it becomes incredibly important for us to be able to follow our training partner through rolls. And not just are the leg locking submissions rotational, but our training partner's reactions to a lot of the leg locking movements are rotational. The same thing is going to be true with our Kimuras here. Okay, it's highly likely as we start to effectively try to submit our training partner with Kimuras that our training partner is going to start rolling in response. Okay, we already talked about it a little bit to like kind of establish T-Kimura situations. You know, in situations where I put my training partner's hand behind his back and I get him to roll. Yes, then the appropriate response here is to move into our T-Kimura situations, cover shoulders, take the back, etc. So we've already covered rolling in one extent. But what happens when we get our training partner involved in submission holds where I have a little bit better control over the arm and my training partner decides to roll? So let's talk about a few of these entries. Okay, I could be in a situation where my two legs are out for that power Kimura. I can be in a situation where my legs are senkaku'd, are using that senkaku Kimura we talked about before. Okay, or when my training partner's hiding his arm, one of the things we often do here is we slip our foot inside the hip or even inside the arm to begin attacking our training partner. Okay, whenever this sort of thing occurs, when I try to get separation between my training partner's hip and his arm, my training partner will often go into a defensive roll. As my training partner goes into his defensive roll to try to prevent from getting submitted with that Kimura, we have potential options to Juji Gatame, my training partner. And then if the further roll happens, it depends on where my legs are as to what's going to happen next. If I can open up one of my legs and my training partner continues to roll, he'll get put into a triangle, okay, or triangle variation, perhaps even ankle senkaku. If my training partner does a good job clearing my legs, what I'll have to do is look to drop this knee to the floor and go into what we refer to as shoulder senkaku, the arm bar. Okay? I pull this against my hip and my knee drops towards the floor. Okay? Let's look at that transition again all the way through. You can just do it on this arm. I'm trying to fight to get an arm out. Maybe I post against the hip. I finally get it out, and my training partner starts rolling through. During the first part of the roll, we look to X the legs over my training partner's neck and enter into Juji Gatame situations. If my training partner does a fair deal or a good job defending that and starts pushing the legs off, we're able to go into shoulder senkaku. If my training partner doesn't do a great job pushing legs off and I'm just opening up my leg and he's naive, he rolls into triangle situations. And finally, if my training partner rolls and continues to roll from this situation, one good way to continue to follow up is to put him right back in that omoplata situation. And from the omoplata, you have access to the legs, the back, triangles, all different kinds of things that we discussed before. Okay? So you can kind of keep this transition going. Let's look at that one more time all the way through. So, let's rotate so you can see the arm. I've gotten into a side control or half guard situation, and I've laced my leg through. I've broken my training partner's hand out, and he goes into a defensive roll. First move is arm bar. Second move is either triangle if he's naive, or if he does a good job clearing legs. Shoulder senkaku. And after the shoulder senkaku, if he beats that and my knee rises, okay, and his head gets down towards the floor, I pass off into omoplata so I can continue to hold on to my training partner. Okay? Once I get here, I can go to any number of different transitions, whether it's sitting up, going after my opponent's legs, whatever the case may be. And we continue that submission chain. I like to include these little parts about rotation in here so we understand practically how important our ability to switch from submission to submission is. Okay, now you see in a real live context as someone rotates how I need to be able to apply one submission hold, then the next, and the next, all the way down the chain until I'm back in the leg locking system. Okay, so I can continue to assault my training partner with submissions no matter where he goes.